Hello and welcome to the Celtic Way morning briefing for Tuesday, the 27th of June. I'm Aidan Macdonald, and today I'm joined by Ryan McGinlay. Ryan, how are you?
I'm doing well, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good. Just before we get started to discuss all today's topics, I would encourage anybody that's interested to take a look at the ticker tape down below. We're currently, it's £12 for 1 year's access to the Celtic Way right now that we're offering. And as a result of that, you'll get access to pieces from people like Stuart Ross, who did a scouting report on current Celtic transfer target Yang Hun Jun. We've also got a newsletter from Ryan discussing the recruitment under Rodgers so far and why kind of he thinks that it's a positive and maybe even one of the reasons why Brendan Rodgers wanted to come back to the club. So get yourself involved in that if you haven't already. Now, as people have probably seen from the title of this video, it was obviously breaking last night, Ryan, and this morning as well, probably depending on fans would have read it, that Reo Hatate's been linked with a move to Saudi Arabia. Now, it's reports coming from Saudi. It's not really anything to do with the media over here as far as we can see. And it's I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation here, but it's Al Ittihad he's been linked with, who I believe they won the league the season that's just finished over there. Appeared to be the sort of top team. They finished ahead of Al Nassr, which is obviously the club that Cristiano Ronaldo's at. So they seem to be the sort of prime team over there. What do you make of that, Ryan? Do you think it's kind of just rumours, or do you think there's something to it? Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about the Saudi Arabian League in football recently. Numerous players signing, Ruben Neves, Benzema's a big one, Kante, Koulibaly from Chelsea just in the last couple of days, and there's numerous
Yep.
other players being linked, such as Bernardo Silva from Manchester City. A lot of it's sort of been done through the Saudi Public Investment Fund, which own Newcastle. They were involved in the sort of PGA golf, Live Golf merger recently as well. So obviously there's a lot of money and a lot of speculation flying about. Do you think there's anything to it, right?
It's a bit of a weird one. I can see the similarities with the Chinese Super League of 3-4 years ago, sort of 2018, 2019, before COVID. I think just with regards to how Saudi Arabia has sort of infiltrated sports in general, it's not going to be a flash in the pan. I think this is going to be a permanent thing. You look at the way Live Golf has now teamed up with PGA Tour. Look at all the events that are going on in Saudi Arabia. It seems that these conglomerates are really pushing for sort of control in most sports, and it seems as if football's the next one. Cristiano Ronaldo's a big one. I know he's 37, but him going over to the Saudi Arabian League was massive for their exposure. But it seems as if the targets are getting younger and younger. Ruben Neves, especially, was a shocker in terms of his age. 25, 26 years old, and he's going to be playing his trade in Saudi Arabia. Look at guys that are in their prime, like Hakim Ziyech. He's going to be playing in Saudi Arabia next season. Potentially Bernardo Silva. I think that would be the most shocking one. A guy that is so informed for Man City at the moment, then playing his trade in Saudi Arabia. It's very, very interesting developments, and it doesn't surprise me that a player like Hatate is getting linked with one of these clubs. If he was to go there, it would be life-changing money. It'd be a complete change of lifestyle for him. To be fair, he would be closer to Japan, so you could say that in terms of a move there. But I'm not sure how valid the reports are. But if they were interested in Hatate, then there would be serious money, I would imagine, for both him and the club.
Yeah, you would have to imagine the fee would be relatively significant. Firstly, because Hatate has, I think it's 4 years left on his deal. He'll only signed January 2022. And secondly, because of the sort of money that's been thrown around by the Saudis, it would obviously be, if in terms of Celtic getting a decent fee for a player, you'd imagine it would be pretty near the Kieran Tierney record, or maybe even potentially over that. But it would also be disappointing to lose Hatate as summer in any circumstances. Spurs have also been the big club that's been getting linked with him, which is also an obvious link given that Ange hasn't long went there. But no matter where he went, it would be disappointing. And I guess for his own career, it would be. I mean, you can understand. Obviously, it's life changing money. I get that, but it would be another one that, a bit like Ruben Neves, I would feel it's a bit of a waste, to be honest. Somebody that I think personally could go and play at a sort of top 4 or 5 club in most of the top leagues in Europe. people might debate on that in terms of skill level, but I think Hatate could slot in at a lot of the sort of best teams in the best leagues. And if he was
I
to
agree
go
with
to the Saudi Arabian Pro League, I think it's called, it would
that.
be a bit disappointing, and it would be an indication that it's not like with Ruben Neves, it's not just players that are going there that are at the end of their career for a sort of final payday, which is what the MLS over the years has been associated with. Messi obviously being the latest player to go to America in that regard. I think he was also wanted by a Saudi Arabian team at some point as well.
It
But
was, yeah.
it would be sort of showing maybe the changing landscape of football. But yeah, it would also be disappointing if Hatate was to leave. I have pulled up some of these numbers earlier. It's 8 goals and 11 assists, I think it was. And sorry, 9 goals and 11 assists in 45 appearances last season. Obviously, there was plenty of games in which Hatate was a standout player on the pitch, even when he didn't contribute a goal or assist. He was vital to how Ange wanted to play, and you'd imagine he'd be an important factor on how Brendan Rodgers wanted his team to play as well. But if they come in with a big money offer, this club, and Hatate wants to go, you'd imagine it's going to be difficult to keep him round.
Yeah, absolutely. It's life-changing money, and it's basically sustainable money for the rest of your life and for your children and grandchildren. I think you've got to look at it in that way as well. Football's a very short career. I wouldn't blame any player for taking the money that the Saudi Arabians are going to be offering them. It's going to be an incredible amount. Even living over there, I know there is. You don't want to go in too much into the politics of what happens over there, but as a football player, you will be more protected than maybe some of the marginalised groups. I think football's just at this point now where you can start to see the sort of changes happening. It seems as if the Premier League was the dominant league, and now it seems like it will have competition with the Saudi League, especially if the transfer targets go younger and younger, and more younger players then decide to go and make that move. You just wonder if there's going to be an expansion to the Champions League in the next few years, because these teams will be sustainable, and you'd maybe see sort of a merger between the two. That's for down the road. But in terms of Hatate, what a season he had last season. I thought right up to the World Cup break, he was a shoe-in for Player of the Year. He was running every single game. It was consistently a 7, 8 out of 10, a 7 at least. But it was mostly 8 out of 10 performances. He would be. He's such an important player to the way that Postecoglou played his football, and I can only imagine he would get better under Brendan Rodgers. Brendan Rodgers seems to really get the best out of these midfielders and wingers, especially. So I would love to see Hatate and a Brendan Rodgers team go to the next level. But it's one of these ones. As horrible as it sounds, every player has a price, and if the money is good for Celtic, then they're going to take it. Celtic are kind of blessed in that position in terms of midfield, that we've got really good sort of replacements. But if you can keep Hatate at the club, then I would be making sure that is, possible and achievable.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree, Ryan. As Sam Hart's saying, Reo's a special player I've always admired. Martin's saying he didn't do it in Europe.
He was one of our best players in Europe.
Jason Lee, the only player we can't sell his Calmet, sorry. Everyone else is for sale if the money is right. This is an interesting one now. I know we don't want to get into the whole Saudi Arabian thing too much, because we are discussing it obviously from a Celtic perspective, but the Saudis can blow the EPL out of the water now. Does that help or hinder clubs like us? What's your thoughts on that, Ryan?
It's a bit. I don't know. In terms of in one way, it's kind of refreshing to see that the Premier League sort of getting their own medicine in terms of players getting plucked from their teams to go to another league, because that happens everywhere else. It seems with the Premier League, players just get taken from like the French league, the Italian league, the Scottish league. They go to the Premier League because it's the best league in the world. It's mental that now there's players like Ruben Neves that are going at the prime of their career to another league. That's crazy to me. That just wouldn't have happened 6-7 years ago, it seems. It just shows you the changing landscape. I'm not sure if it helps us in terms of transfer fees. It might drive the transfer fees up, because of the looming Saudi league that are going to spend X amount of money to get players through the door, to get stars through the door. It might force the Premier League to make bigger moves for our players in the process. It might just increase the players' value. But because it's still a relatively new situation, I would say we don't really know the full landscape of it until we've seen a couple of transfer windows, and we've seen how the Saudi League really works and how serious the owners are taking this new approach. So I think it's just a matter of watching, observing how these teams act, and then reacting positively to that.
I love it saying money sadly talks. The only good thing is EPL become less popular in the world and unfair. And then we'll just leave the end of that message there. I did not notice. A few people are saying, Pete McGee's saying, the Saudi Premier League's a joke, 16 teams, 30 games a season, choose that over playing Champions League with Celtic. And then he makes his feeling clear with the emojis used at the end. Cool Daddy says EPL, Saudi and US leagues are getting bigger, Celtic standing still. I think, just to go back to what you were saying there in terms of the transfer fees, and from that aspect, in terms of Celtic selling players, I'd argue that it is a good thing, if you know what I mean, from that, so as you look at it from a hard, sort of cold perspective like that. In terms of the overall politics and the sort of moral issues with the Saudi League, I don't personally think it's a good thing. It's only somewhere like that's been able to attract all the players, but I guess it will. Premier League clubs, if they want to keep their players or sign talents, maybe not as much from the Scottish League, unfortunately, but from other leagues, they will have to offer more to certain teams. As in a way, seeing the Premier League, like you say, get a taste of their own medicine has been a wee bit satisfying. But I think for the longer term, it's probably not a good thing. And if that did lead down the line to, like you say, Ryan, kind of changes to the Champions League, which nothing would surprise me in terms of UEFA. If they try to, even before it comes to trying to add teams into the Champions League, and I know there's already the Asian Champions League, I believe. I don't know if the Saudi teams are in that, or they're in a separate sort of competition, but I know that is
I think they will be
over there. Before it even becomes adding teams like Al Ittihad, for example, or Al Nassr into the European Champions League, I can't help but think they would try and get a final there. They already have the Spanish Super Cup, I think, over in Saudi Arabia, don't they? They've had the Club World Cup in Qatar recently. I know that's getting changed, obviously. That's getting changed to a 32-team tournament, isn't it? So I can't help but think that it is probably sort of letting them in the back door, which could lead to teams getting in the Champions League or teams getting in the Europa League finals being held there. I know Saudi Arabia were also bidding at one point, I think it was for the 2026 World Cup.
It was a joint bid, yeah.
Tournaments as well, maybe the 2030 one, I don't know. But yeah, it's one of those ones. It's the way football's changing at the moment. I mean, there is money bubbles can burst. I think China's a recent example of that.
Massive example.
I mean, I know COVID, right? I understand that would have played a part, but I think even before then, that league was starting to lose a bit of momentum, and players just won't really go there now. Like I say, the pandemic, did play a role in that, but I think that the bubble was starting to burst even before that.
It was.
But yeah, Tim saying on the way to a Northern Hemisphere Champions League. I mean, that's what Ryan was discussing.
Kevin Ferrier, off the table.
Sorry, Ryan, to cut you off. Kevin Ferrier being very optimistic here if we're offered to get 40 million. I mean, I don't think Celtic would not that bad, but whether or not they get offered that, probably something different. Jason Lee, we get offered 25 million plus for anybody we need to sell. That does feel, I know the market's obviously changed since Kieran Tierney left Celtic, but that feels like a kind of general cut-off point, doesn't it? The fact that is a record fee at the moment. Maybe Celtic would try and get even a few million over that for a player just so they can say they've broken the new record. Yeah, it does feel like that would probably be the sort of fee for somebody like that, a Carter Vickers, a Hatate or a Jota, if they were to leave when they've still got 3-4 years left on their deal, if they have another season of Champions League football underneath their belt, then I think you'd be hoping you could get that sort of fee for them, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that just on the point that I was going to make, I think nothing's off the table at this point in football. Football's at a very much a crossroads moment. You see all the developments in every other sport. It seems like things are changing. You look at the Super League movement that happened 3 years ago. That isn't going away anywhere. The Champions League, the new model next season, is basically a UEFA sponsored It's basically a UEFA sponsored Super League with regards to the table that's going to get used, the Swiss league format. Football's at this crossroads moment, as I said. We don't really know what way it's going to turn. I think Celtic just need to be proactive in it and leave nothing off the table. They need to keep themselves right and do what is best for them. I think you're going to see changes in the next 10, 15 years. I don't think the status quo is going to stay as it is. I think there'll be moves. What that means, I'm not sure exactly what that means. They're just speculating at this point. But the way that football has changed even recently, it makes me think that there are going to be changes, especially with the emergence of this Saudi league that does look like it has legs. The Chinese Super League always looked as if it was a flash in the pan. There was moves getting made, but it didn't look sustainable. This one looks more sustainable because Saudi Arabia have the money to back it up. If Celtic can sell their players for more to the Saudi Arabian league, then Celtic have got to do what's best for themselves. They're a business as well. As well as a football team, they're a business, and if they can get the best money out of selling their players there, then I don't really have a problem with it because other teams are doing it. Therefore, I think it's fine.
Stephen Ray with an interesting comment. The Saudi League will lead football two ways. It'll either be world reform in regards to transfers and wage caps, or it will push forward the Super League. Said he knows
Totally agree.
Yeah, I would agree with that, unfortunately. I think the Champions League, really, I know they said they were already doing the reforms before the Super League stuff came around, but we weren't entirely sure on what the exact plans were at that stage. That feels like a sort of rebuttal to the whole Super League format, doesn't it? And I think the three teams that were still kind of kicking the Super League idea around was it Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Juventus? I think it was.
Juventus have pulled out recently. They released a statement saying that they're not interested. So it's basically the two sort of Spanish Super Cup teams that are in this Super League. League of Two. I wouldn't mind the two of them playing each other every week, but it'd probably defeat the purpose of El Clasico after about 3 or 4 games.
Yeah, you would imagine so, but the fact those two clubs are there, two of the sort of biggest football teams in the world, that will encourage other teams to join. And it did feel like, I don't want to go back over the Super League stuff too much because I know it's kind of been discussed to death, but it was it did feel like it was kind of one group of greedy people just being maybe slightly less greedy than others in terms of like, Sky in the Champions League managing to get the Super League, get it quashed for now. But yeah, I reckon it'll be coming back, Ryan, probably involving Saudi teams as well. Just if there's any more comments here. John McCauley, youngest player to move there so far. I think that is Ruben Neves. In terms of big names, obviously there might have been younger players that we don't know about, but in terms of big names, I believe he is the sort of...
David is 26, I think.
Yeah. Bernardo Silva, like you say, Ryan, he's also a wee bit older than that, but he would probably
28.
He'd probably be the kind of marquee name, really, even though Benzema, Ronaldo's went there, in terms of players that are right at their peak that you'd imagine could play for like basically any team in the world would probably be quite happy to have him. If he was to go there, I think that would be a bit of a concern. But moving on sort of from that, on to Celtic transfer targets rather than players leaving the club. Yang Hun-jun, who's obviously been getting linked with the club for a period of time now. He's a winger playing in the K-League for, I'm going to probably butcher this pronunciation again,
Gangwon
FC. They're currently second bottom, so they are struggling. But reports in South Korea are saying that he's basically trying to force through a move so he can join. Apparently, he's the player and the agent and the club are not in good terms at the moment. And the quotes, that's probably putting it lightly, to be fair. The sort of quotes from the player that have came out from media in South Korea, he's said, "I want to go to Celtic. Playing in Europe was something that every player dreams of. First of all, I'm a member of Gangwon, so it's important to do my best to get the team out of the relegation zone. But I also want to make it to Europe. I want to go in the summer, not the winter." Sounds a bit of a contradiction there, to be honest. After that, he goes on to address the fact that it's been reported they had the chance to move to the MLS, Minnesota United, apparently, and I think it was in January or last summer.
Yeah.
And he the sort of club kind of blocked that move, but he was fine because he was enjoying his football at the time. I don't know if he's kind of trying to insinuate that he was basically told if you don't go now, the next time an offer like that or an offer to Europe comes up, you can then leave. I don't know about the specifics of that because he doesn't say that word for word, but that's maybe reading it between the lines a wee bit. But It definitely sounds like a player that wants to come to Celtic, Ryan, doesn't it?
It certainly does, yeah. I just wonder if Celtic still want this player, because they're very much in talks, and it looks as if any sort of day now they'll announce Marco Tilio as their new right winger. Now, Yang also plays in that position, which sort of gives you parallels to that sort of Riley McGree, Matt O'Reilly situation that happened a year or so ago. You just wonder if Celtic have moved on to maybe their second target, or maybe the better target in Marco Tilio. I know Marco Tilio's got better numbers than Yang this season for sure. 1 goal and 1 assist. For a struggling Gangwon team, that he's perhaps maybe the reason, or one of the reasons why the team struggled, because he couldn't do the same, or he couldn't contribute the same numbers that he did last season, because it was a real highlight season for him. I just wonder if Celtic have moved on and tried to pursue a different target. I noticed somebody had replied to me on Twitter today when I posted my story, saying that Joe Durgeon, who was a scout at Melbourne City, is now at Celtic since 2023. Just putting 2 and 2 together, it seems as if that might have been one of his recommended targets for the side. He might have scouted him previously for Melbourne City, and then thought that he could make that jump up and put 2 and 2 together. Now we're getting linked with Tilio. So if that's the case and he's got his way, then that's probably a good acquisition, a good sort of recommendation. Because by all accounts, I've watched the two clips, or the 2 players respectively. And out of the 2 of them, I would take Tilio. Tilio looks like he's got a higher ceiling to me than Yang. Just going by the clips on YouTube, and I know that these clips can make any player look good. We talk about that almost every day on this platform. But yeah, he does look like a good player, and it seems as if Celtic are going to get their man in the next couple of days. So it remains to be seen if we will sign another right winger as well. We might get 2 for that position. That would then maybe point to Abada leaving the club. If you can get 2 players that give you the same sort of output as Abada would do, then I think that's a win. And then obviously play Jota on the left-hand side next season, because I don't think we'll be accommodating Maeda to that extent next season. It's an interesting one, but I think Tilio will come through the door the next couple of days. It just remains to be seen about if Yang will follow him.
I guess you could say maybe there's a couple of players that are going to leave Celtic this summer in those positions. Abada's obviously the one that's getting touted to move away. As much as I hope Celtic don't lose, Jota or Maeda or Haksabanovic, etc., there could be one of them moves on as well. So that could be why Celtic have maybe been interested in both players. But I do agree that sort of Tilio seems to be the one that's standing out at the moment, both in terms of quality and in terms of it being likely to happen. In fact, it's basically, I think it was some representative from, it might have been the manager or somebody at Melbourne City basically came out and said the deal was done. So it does look like that's probably going to be the one that's moving sooner. Just in terms of Yang work though, just to put Stuart Ross's scouting report, that's I mentioned it obviously at the start of the broadcast, but that's available on the website now. It is quite detailed and it breaks down sort of, what he's good at, what he's got to work on, and it looks like the sort of player that Brendan Rodgers would be able to develop, but we'll just have to wait and see whether or not he comes through the door or not.
It would be interesting, actually, just bringing up this comment by Mark E. Yang's club only want him until October. Could Tilio be the player that we bring in permanently just now, and Yang be potentially the player that we send out on loan until October when the K1 league is finished, and then bring him in as sort of a January move or a wee bit earlier as well? That could be a move that Celtic make, and then it covers them. And maybe even with a recall option, that if Tilio did get injured, then we could bring him back halfway through the season, just to cover ourselves basically, if any potential injuries happened or a shortage in players. But if we were to get both through the door, then I wouldn't complain. You get 2 young players. I think they're both 21, 22 years old, players that can develop. Just talking about that article that Stuart did yesterday, it was very interesting. He's a player that we can definitely improve, but he does have a lot of quality, a lot of raw talents, but there's certain things that he needs to hone, such as his shooting, etc. But he seems like a natural finisher when he does have the time on the ball, and he's an exciting player.
Yeah, he does seem it. Obviously, Andrew Galley is saying Tilio's a good attacking midfield option as well as a winger. Yeah, when I was first reading into him, it did feel like he could probably play a few different roles in the forward positions. But I do agree, maybe at the moment it looks like it was somebody that could be coming in as a right winger, particularly if Abada does move on, which obviously we don't know about. We're kind of just speculating based off the way he was at the cup final, etc. But yeah, it's obviously one to keep an eye on, and you'd imagine hopefully that will develop over the next couple of days.
Yeah, also, there was a report in the Daily Mail yesterday that said that Abada's rejected his latest contract offer. So if that is the case and he's itching for a move, then I don't think Celtic should stand in their way. I do like Abada as a player. I think he's a really good goal scorer, but I think he's got a lot of... I think he'd be taking a risk leaving Celtic for a sort of step up in terms of team. If he was going to another team, he'd need to be very much a development player, I think. I don't think he would be starting every week. There's still so much of his game that, in my opinion, he needs to improve on, which is fine as a young player. He's, 21, 22 years old. So he's still got plenty of time to hone his skills. But I think a lot of the winger play leaves a lot to be desired at times for Avada, and that's where my frustrations, I think, come watching him. He's very hot and cold with regards to his form, and I think if a team can deal with that more than Celtic, then we should be looking to sort of move him on. If there's a player that can deal with his up and down form, then I would be all for facilitating that move.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Ryan. I think in terms of Abada's actual development, for him a year probably working under a coach like Brendan Rodgers wouldn't be a bad thing, but for Celtic as a club, it seems like it could be a good time to sell him, assuming you're going to have somebody come in that, I know he's got his deficiencies, Abada, particularly as a winger. If he was a sort of player through the middle, I think people would be more desperate to keep him because of his numbers, but you would still need somebody to come in and be scoring those goals, I would say. Either that or you'll be looking for Kyogo, etc., to be adding like another 10, 11, 12 goals on these numbers, which given these numbers last year would be a sort of heavy feat. There's obviously still, Andrew Gray is saying there's a lot of lower EPL clubs that will be wanting our players, yeah. I don't doubt that. I think quite a few of them have probably got a higher ceiling than that, to be honest. Tarmac saying Tilio agreed terms of Celtic moves just subject to work permit and all documents being issued. Maybe with Tilio we'll get a similar thing over the next couple of days like Celtic got with Hatate. Kyogo, Hatate, etc. When you get the wee announcement at the start saying, they've joined subject to international clearance, and it's maybe another couple of weeks before they arrive with they get pictures with the scarf, etc. They do a press conference, but I think it'll definitely be one to work on. Dennis Jameson asking, what about centre-back position or CDM need to strengthen, do you think? I think having another option in both of them would maybe be worthwhile. In that sort of CDM, or as it was called as we looked at it under Ange, the number 6 position, McGregor did play there. I think Awata's tidy enough to sort of also feature in there. There's been a lot of it, maybe Celtic getting like a destroyer type. This is probably a bit of a untactical way to look at it, Ryan, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
A Victor Wanyama type of player to sort of get kind of stuck in, particularly for Europe. Maybe that would be where they would look. I think we're probably maybe more likely to get somebody like that under Rodgers, and you probably would be
Absolutely
under Ange, as much as they don't play the exact same formation. Obviously, similar styles in a way, but I think you would be able to get somebody like that probably more likely to come rather than under Ange, where I think he probably preferred maybe a more technical player in there.
Yeah, very much the number 6 role. I think he's been sort of rechristened the Rodri role now, or the Casemiro role. Those are the two sort of standouts. I remember doing an article about that actually a couple of months ago. It's weird how time flies, where I think we might actually be in. I think we'll be in the market for a holding midfielder. It all depends on how Brendan Rodgers rates Iwata. Now, they've not announced that Iwata is a permanent player yet, but it was a compulsory buy option, so he is at the club. He will have signed his deal, and that will be him a permanent player, or it will be on the 1st of July, I would assume. If there's one player from the City group that I would love Celtic to get that is attainable for us, or potentially could be attainable, it's Vinicius Souza. I said it last season. He had a season on loan at Espanyol. He's a number 6. He's a Brazilian destroyer, which would be absolutely perfect for this team. I think Rodgers could do wonders with him, with his development. Rodgers is used to working with a good holding midfielder, and Amati and Ndidi as well. I think you need a holding midfielder, especially in Europe. You need somebody that's going to put out fires before the defenders even see the fire that's happening. A player like Vinicius Souza, if he is attainable and if he doesn't want to make that further step up into a bigger league, then I'd be all for trying to get him through the door. I was desperate for us to get him last season. It didn't work out that way. It seemed to be to and froing. Maybe the lure of a more elite manager or a bigger name in Brendan Rodgers might be, and the lure of the Champions League as well, having that extra exposure might be what Souza needs to join the club. But somebody of that ilk would do a great job at Celtic. I think Celtic should be looking for a player that's going to do that in Europe.
Yeah, I think, like I say, it's definitely more likely under Rodgers. I've now lost that comment I was trying to put up there, but I think it was Pat Laugh was saying, what about Kings Kangwa? That's the player who Red Star Belgrade. He is a sort of central mid. I think I was kind of thinking he was more of an advanced midfielder, but I could be wrong in that.
Plays both, I think.
Play both, right? Okay, so similar to McGregor in that regard. That could be somebody that Celtic might be interested to be in. Or apparently there was a slight rumour that went around that Celtic may have been interested in him, but that seems to have died down a bit. But obviously when he was getting touted, I know you did a news article on him, Ryan, and sort of looked at him and he looked like he could be a bit of a talent. But there's a lot of names floating about, and that's what's going to be now with the manager in, which was the main sort of bone of contention for a couple of weeks. It's going to be all about players now in terms of them getting in, and Celtic are lucky there's no Champions League qualifiers, which I feel I'm still trying to enjoy, Ryan. Usually you're kind of building up for that in the next, I don't know, 2.5, 3 weeks or so, the first game for that. But the fact there's none of them, we've got the full pre-season, the Tour of Japan, but you'd imagine Rodgers will want to get players in ASAP, and hopefully they can do that.
Yeah, we've got one player. That's what we need to remember. We've got a midfielder that can play a couple of roles as well. It'll be up to Rodgers to decide what position he's best to play in. I'm sure he'll get game time. He seemed to be a first team player at Vålerenga, 20 years old, really highly rated. It's great to have that. So I'd much rather have, and this is so harsh on a player that done so well last season, but I'd much rather have a 20-year-old try to break into the team than a James McCarthy or a Aaron Moy, because Celtic in turn will get a profit off of this player if they do well. 20-year-old Norwegian, that'll sell. You look down south, arguably one of the best midfielders in the Premier League is Odegaard. He's a Norwegian midfielder. So having someone who has been compared to Odegaard is very good for the club, I would say. If the club covers itself there, where they've got a young player that can play for a couple of years, that can move about the pitch freely, and then Celtic can get a profit in the next couple of years, that's absolutely brilliant. That shows that the model, that very much like the article that I was writing yesterday, that shows that the model works, because you're getting the results on the pitch and then you're getting the profit off the pitch. And that's what Celtic have got to do. They've got to keep themselves right in this current climate. They've got to get the best money for players, and the way to do that is by having an aggressive transfer model. Will be interesting to see what other players Rodgers does manage to recruit. He's a big name and it looks as if he's going to get back. So any of these City group players that want to come through the door, they'll all be desperate to come, because it's Brendan Rodgers, an elite manager, and it's a step up in terms of the teams that they're currently playing for. So hopefully we can get the best City group based players, and then maybe some other players that they've scouted. But I don't want it just, I think that's important to say, I don't want it just to be City group players. There's got to be a nice mix. There's got to be a hybrid. You don't want it getting thrown about that Celtic are a feeder club to the City group. You want us to do our own thing as well.
Yeah, I completely agree, Ryan, and a lot of people in the chat seem to be agreeing with you as well. Just when you were touching on recruitment and an aggressive transfer policy, you obviously did the newsletter on that yesterday. It's available on the site today. I've put that in the comments if people want to see it. That was a really interesting article and kind of shows you how hopefully the kind of recruitment strategy, we know it's changed at Celtic obviously in the recent years, but hopefully it's going to continue to develop, you know, with Mark Law, etc. in post. Les is saying Moy still has a lot to offer and be great to have on the bench. Of course, Aaron Moy's still got a lot to offer. There's obviously been certain speculation about his future at Celtic. I'd imagine we'll probably find out about that over the next few weeks.
I think it's just all about the medical prognosis.
McGinlay,
thank you very much, Jason Lee. Says, Jason Lee, 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 Jason Because that back injury doesn't seem to be going away, or that rumour
Nah,
of
because
the
he's
back
older as
injury.
well, so you always worry when players are getting injuries at that age. Steve Malloy says Kings Kangwa is only 5'8", not so much power in there, in his opinion. And then I think there was a counter argument to that. And there was somewhere basically saying that it was, who were they talking about? Here we go. Roberto Carlos was only 5'8" and he was powerful. I
Even
think we
more,
did well to get a Roberto Carlos type player personally, but
he could still
yeah,
probably
no,
do a job.
yeah, probably would, to be honest. I've seen him in a few of those charity games and he always looks a
Mhm.
player. But yeah, I think we'll leave it there for today, guys. But no, it's been a really good discussion. Obviously, talking about Hatate, hopefully that will die down a bit. And it was obviously positive talking about Yang, talking about Tilo. That there'll be imaginably a bit of movement on that over the couple of days, hopefully, assuming that the reports are correct, what have been coming out from Australia and the comments that have been coming out from Melbourne City as well. So fingers crossed Celtic can get that over the line, as getting players in as soon as possible is always ideal. But just before we finish up, I'd encourage anybody that's interested to look at the ticker tape down below. You can subscribe to the Celtic Way website and support top quality journalism covering the club you all love. There's going to be plenty of scouting reports over the summer. There's going to be tactical pieces, features and newsletters from Ryan and Tony, interviews as well. Obviously, Ryan's recently been he spoke to somebody about Rodgers' time at Leicester and also about holding Thiago home. I believe there's going to be a piece or an art or a video at some point coming about Tilo as well. So get yourself involved, guys, in that if you haven't already. It's www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. Ryan, thanks very much for joining us, mate. Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a really enjoyable discussion today. We're talking about the wider issues in football as well. It seems like a sort of politics podcast as well, but no, it's all revolved around Celtic, and I've really enjoyed the discussion today. Thanks to everybody for commenting.
Indeed, always a pleasure. Thanks very much, guys. Tony and Ryan will be back tomorrow to speak about probably yet another transfer link. Hopefully not for a player away this time. Hopefully maybe talking about Tilo coming in, etc. So we'll see you tomorrow, guys. Cheers.